Next up is Carmen Lima. Carmen is the coordinator of Quercus's Waste Information Center, founder and coordinator of SOS Amianto, the Portuguese Asbestos Victim Support Group. Carmen has a degree in environmental engineering, a postgraduate degree in environmental management and sustainable construction, and a master's in planning and sustainable construction. And currently, she's working on her PhD in environmental engineering dedicated to the issue of asbestos. She has participated as a speaker and a moderator in several conferences and auditions, not only in Portugal, but in Cape Verde, Belgium, Brazil, and the United States. She frequently participates in television programs, in interviews and articles for the media. Carmen, we're delighted to have you share your knowledge with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to start with to thank you for this invite to ADAO, and especially to Linda. You heard, I'm from Portugal. I founded the first Portuguese asbestos victim group, the SOS Asbestos, and I worked a long time ago in this issue. I will start to share with you my presentation. So, in Portugal, when we talk about asbestos, everybody thinks about cement, asbestos, covers, and a few materials. But I can say that nobody imagines the diversity of asbestos materials, and they think that the only problem is the asbestos covers, especially in schools. And we can find asbestos in a lot of other materials in those same schools. Today, the priority in Portugal for the workers, the parents, and even for the Portuguese government is the asbestos cement covers. There is any diagnostic previous to the asbestos materials, so they remove those covers and believe that those buildings transform themselves into asbestos-free places. But in Portugal, we have used several examples of materials with asbestos, like deposits for water, flush toilets, flocked asbestos, or even insulation. We have used asbestos even in Armstrong ceiling, vinyl floors and carpets, and even in window blind tape. It's usually to find asbestos in heat equipment, radiators, or even in toasters, or even in materials that are being used in industrial use. In Portugal, the vast majority of the fibers used were chrysotyl and imported from Canada, but there are references for the use of amosite and crucidolite, and even a mixture of those three fibers in the factories that produce the asbestos cement materials here in Portugal. There were three, and they do this mixture to improve the characteristics of the materials that they produce. Since the first knowledge of lung disease caused by the exposure to asbestos until the banning here in Europe in 2005, it was over 100 years of exposure to asbestos. After the prohibition, Portugal needs to implement the European United obligation, like the workers' protection, the diagnosis requirement for private and public buildings, and for the removal regulation and standards. Currently, any company in Portugal can remove asbestos, do not need a license or a professional portfolio or even a certification, and it promotes a non-compliance situations and a lack of accuracy and a lack of protection on the removal of asbestos. In 2015, the European Economic and Social Committee published an opinion that came to present asbestos as a priority issue for Europe. This opinion proposes the elimination of asbestos in Europe until 2032. Is a goal that could be very ambitious for Portugal, who started a few years ago to take the first steps in the identification of materials and equipment with asbestos, and where asbestos removal is accomplished without great control or criteria. The numbers in Portugal are less expressive than the other European countries, such as Spain or even Italy, like Barry showed us, but we believe they are far from the reality. There are many mesotheliomas, there are misdiagnostic, and lung cancers caused by the exposure of asbestos are not quantified. The official numbers are low for the reasons that I mentioned, and 98% of cases are not reported to the employer, so that only 2% of the disease caused by the exposure of asbestos are considered as an occupational disease. On the other hand, there are different parameters for the characterization of the occupational disease in the European Union, which leads to the same disease can be marked in one country and not classified in the other. The survey in public buildings here in Portugal began in 2014 and it was followed by a search for a funding to support the removal of asbestos in these kind of buildings. The money only achieved to Portugal in the last years, and the first step will start with the schools. It is important to start with the schools, but we believe that it is important to remove all kind of asbestos in all kind of materials in schools. There are some problems with this survey. We think it needs to be improved, namely with regards to the identification of all asbestos materials, like I said, that are not identified in the schools. Later, it came the obligation to identify asbestos in working private buildings, and is still missing an important work. We need to regulate the obligation to analyze the private housing buildings that are not yet regulated here in Portugal. There's a lot of work to do, since the investigation, the origin, the incorporation, the production, and the use. We have started to diagnosticate the application in buildings, private and public buildings, and define the removal actions for the most serious cases. But it's still missing the monitoring plan. The management of asbestos, of waste containing asbestos, has been regulated already here in Portugal, and SOS Asbestos has already asked for a national plan of action for asbestos, following the recommendations of the European Economic and Social Committee. Some rash decisions that have been adopted here can have serious consequences. In the last months, the Portuguese government banned the reception of asbestos cement in some landfills, and the result was they started to be abandoned in all over the place, in all over the Portuguese regions. The SOS Asbestos, there I present you, is the first Portuguese victim group support, and we want to contribute to raise awareness over the population about the risk of asbestos exposure, press the government agency to identify and regulate the market of asbestos removal, where we are working now, and I'm finished our first proposal for standards, and I hope that I can have the authorization and send to you to you know that. And we want to alert to the risks of the bed removals and denounce the situations of non-conformity and illegality in asbestos removal. As a research and with the SOS Asbestos team support, we have been following several case studies here in Portugal, carrying out the evaluation of some situations, such as the old asbestos cement materials factory, like this one that you are seeing in those photos, is Cimianto. It's near to Lisbon, and which after a no control equipment removal, it became completely contaminated with asbestos fibers. And here we can find include big bags with asbestos dust. Like you see in these photos, this situation is very similar to the case of Eternity in Brazil, and Fernanda can testify that they are very real similar what it was do in Brazil. Another image very interesting is the fact that these photos are taken for an artist, because the factory was abandoned and everybody can enter, even the artists can come in and take photos. And I find these photos in a website in internet. So here you can see the factory is still like the last days of working, and there are no limits to enter in this place. Another case was the Portuguese train workshop. There we visit and see everything they are done, and follow up the asbestos removal works in the carriage. Those carriage are purchased from our Spain neighbors, and they are recovered into new ones, like you see in the photo on the right. Other case that we are monitoring is the emblematic Portuguese Funchal vessel. We are following up the asbestos removal works that are doing right now to eliminate the blue asbestos, like you see in the photo of the center, that was applied on 5 fire stop zones. And it will be recovered to an hotel here in Lisbon. The solution is to eradicate asbestos. And for that, we need to have rigor and care. In principle, in fact, in the works of asbestos removal, these works will increase more and more, and we need to be very focused on the prevention, on the protection, on the removal, and in a waste, asbestos waste management. And in the photo of the right, you can see the finished product of the vitrification process that transforms asbestos in a rock. In a conclusion, here in Portugal, we do not believe there is a danger and a not dangerous asbestos like some people want us to believe. It still has a very strong lobby to promote this kind of opinions, and we need to remove the asbestos materials with a previous diagnosis. There are only cement asbestos here in Portugal. We have a lot of different materials, and it's very easy to see them if you know them. So we need to regulate the removal activity to protect everybody and to prevent more victims. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Carmen. Appreciate you bringing us up to speed on what's happening in Portugal.